the National Council on Substance Abuse, the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Home Affairs and Information, along with other delegates from Barbados, have gathered in Washington for the 76th regular session of CICAD. CICAD, the InterAmerican Drug Abuse Control Commission, is the consultative and advisory body of the OAS on the drug issue. The occasion is especially significant for Barbados as the island will be elected to chair CICAD's expert group on drug demand reduction, marking the first time that an English-speaking Caribbean country has held this position.
Today marks the opening of the 76th regular session of the Inter-American Drug Abuse Control Commission, CICAD. It is a signal day for Barbados. Barbados will be elected to chair the expert group on demand reduction. It's the first time an English-speaking Caribbean country has been elected to do so. And we assume chairmanship from today until September next year when we host the meeting of the demand reduction expert group in Barbados.
Refer to the note CICAD document 2890/24 informing of Barbados's candidacy for the position of chair of the experts group on demand reduction. Are there any objections? I see none. I therefore declare Barbados as the chair of the demand reduction group.
Since the inception of CICAD, Barbados has recognized the importance of maintaining active membership, and in doing so has benefited tremendously from technical and other assistance across all areas. Institutional strengthening, demand reduction, supply reduction, CICAD's multilateral evaluation mechanism, and its Inter-American Observatory on Drugs. As the Minister with responsibility for the agency whose remit is demand reduction, I'm especially pleased that Barbados has been given the opportunity to assume leadership in this critical area of prevention, treatment, rehabilitation, and the social reintegration of persons who are impacted by drug use, especially problematic drug use. This is an area which has the potential to derail growth at the individual level, at the community level, at the national level. If we're not intentional in establishing efficient systems both to prevent and respond to illicit drug use, we may be faced with the very real possibility of an ever-increasing overburdened justice system, a strained healthcare system, lost productivity, and environmental destruction. Our people across this hemisphere deserve better outcomes. CICAD has been good to Barbados, and now I believe that it is indeed timely that Barbados can showcase how it has put to use all the assistance from which we have benefited.
Barbados chose itself to chair the Demand Reduction Experts Group. This is a chair of the Demand Reduction Experts Group that rotates every year. Barbados had been the vice chair for the previous year. Brazil was the chair, and now Barbados has moved up to be the chair. And as CICAD Executive Secretary, I am very pleased that Barbados has taken this chair. It's a sign of Barbados' strong support of CICAD, which has included financial contributions and in-kind contributions. Very, very pleased that Barbados now is the chair of the Demand Reduction Experts Group.
So what also I need to speak to is this whole business of what evidence-based programming looks like. In our part of the world, even if we borrow programs from other parts of the world, they do not easily fit our context at times, but it is what we have. And we're told that we should be using evidence-based programs and evidence-based this and evidence-based that, but sometimes it is difficult for us to do so. And even as we try to build our local body of research, we are a lot of the times told there are not sufficient resources. So it really goes back to, as was stated and as Jorge clearly stated, this whole interagency approach, this whole governmental approach on moving the actual work and the understanding down from the political level where decisions are taken, and given the practitioners the resources, the skills, making sure they're skilled, building out our institutional capacity so that we can better respond to the persons who are in need of treatment, because we are the persons who see those persons who are in need of treatment and are better placed to respond with a little more immediacy.
So Barbados is now in a fantastic position to bring our experience to bear, not just in Barbados, but across the whole CICAD territory, across the Caribbean, Latin America, right? We are the ones now who will be spearheading what happens in the drug demand reduction space across the Caribbean and Latin America. And that is a major, major achievement. I want to just shout out NCSA. I can't do it enough. I want to shout them out for their work in Barbados, their outreach to young people, their programs like the Project Soft program, their programs in school, their programs in the prison. I want to thank them for the work that they do that is largely unheralded. NCSA has gone from being one of those under the radar organizations or departments in my ministry to be at the forefront. Their PR recently has been amazing. Their videos, their messages are cutting edge. They're targeting the youth of today. They're targeting the person of today with a new message in a new way, using social media, using the technologies that actually make the message relevant and immediate. And I want to go on the record in thanking NCSA for stepping up to the plate. Stepping up to the plate, not just in Barbados, but stepping up to the plate in the Caribbean and Latin America, and pushing for Barbados to become the chair of the expert group, and for Barbados actually attaining that, putting us in a position to bring our policies to bear, to influence policies on a larger scale, and to do the best that we can for our country and to help reduce the use of illegal drugs in Barbados.
The Inter-American Drug Abuse Control Commission, which is known by its acronym CICAD, that is the body which reports to the Organization of American States on issues related to drug use across the hemisphere. CICAD is composed of 2 sections, and drug demand is part of one of those sections, which deals with the responses to drug use, which are not on the supply side or the control side of the coin. The demand reduction group is made up of experts in a variety of areas in demand reduction. Experts in the area of prevention, statisticians, treatment providers, persons who are well-versed in reintegration into the society, and this is something that we are looking at this year as we go on. As I referenced earlier, the demand reduction expert group provide recommendations to the wider OAS on issues relating to hemispheric development, how we go about developing national anti-drug plans. We work within the context of the Hemispheric Plan of Action for the period, and this current period is 2021-2025, which that will soon be renewed.
There are many concerns. First of all, the rise of synthetic drugs, synthetic opioids, other synthetic drugs like Molly, which are becoming an increasing problem in more and more OAS member states. Also marijuana, the rise in the level of THC in marijuana is hitting people when they're not expecting it. They're expecting marijuana to be a softer drug, quote unquote, but in fact marijuana is being bred to have a higher THC content. In certain cases around the hemisphere, it has been adulterated with other drugs. So really across the range, and then of course drugs like cocaine and other drugs that have been around for a long time, there is always concern. There is even concern that drug traffickers are using artificial intelligence to formulate drugs, a mixture in many cases of organic and synthetic drugs. So there is much to be concerned about, which makes the CICAD's work and the work of the Demand Reduction Experts Group even more important.
The Demand Reduction Experts Group at this time is faced with quite a few new issues that were either not present before or present, but is now being represented differently. There is an emphasis on how we treat to women and gender in the drug response. And this is something that is not perhaps thought of immediately when we think of drug responses. We're looking at the whole issue of communication and how we communicate issues relating to drug response. Issues like stigma. How do we provide adequate treatment facilities? And when we speak of gender in relation to gender, treatment facilities for women who find themselves impacted by drug use and who would wish to seek treatment, but issues of childcare. They themselves may be heads of households. They may be caring for older parents at the time. And so how do we integrate that into the whole system of treatment which exists? And this, of course, looks different for each country in the hemisphere. And so this is why it is important for all the countries to get together, to see what works. We learn from each other. And some of us may be surprised that even in the Caribbean subgroups, the responses are so different. Even though we are neighbors, even though there's little geographical space between us, the realities of each country may not lend itself to sort of one type of intervention across countries. And so we develop our technical expertise in the area of drug abuse, which is important because educational facilities and educational opportunities for this particular area in this part of the hemisphere, they're difficult to come by. And so in the networking, we're able to learn and to share from others in the field.
A drug demand reduction agency, a service provision agency, was set up to do just what it was set up to do. However, the response to drug use is so multifaceted that it cannot remain within the particular agency within which it was set up. And so we have to reach out to see how do we provide housing? How do we provide, perhaps it is just another educational opportunity? How do we take care of children? How do we take care of persons themselves? Something as simple as having the appropriate attire to go look for a job. If somebody decides they don't want a particular type of treatment, what do we do? If somebody turns up at an agency and you're trying to find out certain information and they don't want to give that information, how do you go about giving the best type of service without infringing on that and that person's rights?
What I'd say is the drug problem is constantly changing. And we've seen that just in the last few years with the move to synthetic drugs, with the rise in the level of THC in marijuana. It is constantly changing, and therefore our responses to the drug problem also need to change and adapt. And we do that in various ways. You do that through, for example, alternatives to incarceration like drug treatment courts. We do that through counter-drug police training, which we do in Trinidad and Tobago, along with the Trinidadian National Police at our counter-drug intelligence school there, which we do via early warning systems, which Barbados has. Our InterAmerican Observatory on Drugs supports those. So many different ways in which we respond to what is a constantly changing drug threat.
My experience at CICAD 76 was a phenomenal one. Obviously, it was my first time, so there were lots of eye-opening experiences throughout the session. The first one was learning about the early warning systems, our progress in Barbados, and the experts presenting on their progress across the region. It was very encouraging for me. Obviously, persons are at different stages, but I'm very happy at where we are in Barbados and where the region is going on in terms of the trajectory. The thing I was most impressed with is the fact that it is not a talk shop. I've been to many meetings and there are many plans, many recommendations. What I liked about this CICAD was persons were actually reporting on the work done. And I got to realize that it is not a talk shop. It is about action and it's about solution. It's about my mantra, more action, less talk. That is something that made me exceedingly happy. And that was repeated across the region. So I'm very happy about that. Another thing I would like to underscore was understanding the importance of organizations like the NCSA, the National Council for Substance Abuse in Barbados, and those similar types of bodies across the region. People have this belief that as we go towards decriminalizing of marijuana, particularly cannabis, and also looking at even legalizing the medical use, the medicinal marijuana, etc., that there's less of a need for bodies like NCSA, who over the years have really looked at preventing substance abuse, who've looked at education, demand reduction, etc. The fact is that there's more a need for organizations like the National Council on Substance Abuse, because as we increase use, it is important to ensure that we don't increase abuse. So there's more a need. When we also look at the crime that we have across the region, there's a direct correlation and causation shown in research between the certain crimes and certain types of drugs. In the region, we have a serious issue as it relates to this idea of mollies and so on. Internationally, it might be fentanyl. We have our own issues here in Barbados and across the region. Research coming out of the drug rehabilitation centers and pulled together by the NCSA has shown that we've had various drugs creeping into our society over the last 10 years, drugs like ecstasy and so on. And I believe it is very important to have organizations like the NCSA to continue not only the research, but the interventions that they bring. One of the things I learned is that they're doing so many things, and people may not recognize it, people may not notice, but the camps that they have, the projects that they do, the in-school programs that they facilitate, all of these are extremely critical when we think about what the NCSA does and what they need to do going forward. Another important thing for me is looking at this whole idea of demand reduction. Barbados will now pick up chairmanship for the next 2 years in Latin America and the Caribbean for the expert group for demand reduction. That is a big deal. And I'm very excited that my colleague and friend, the Minister, the Honorable Wilfred Abrams, he be taking on that lead, leading that charge from the Ministry of Home Affairs. And I believe that Barbados, as usual, will do a fantastic job in leading that. Demand reduction is extremely important, as it is one of the pillars that we look at when we look at the overall look towards substance abuse and dealing with drugs generally. I'm very happy that I attended CICAD 76 and learned about the intricacies in relation to medicinal marijuana, the banking around it, the need for greater research, not just to identify drugs, but to understand what is in them, the heavy metals, the chemicals, what's the potency. All of these are things that are extremely, extremely important. So overall, I would say it was a phenomenal experience. It was a great, great time that we had every single session. I would like to commend all the experts, all the regional representatives, the chairpersons who kept the sessions going. The overall experience, I would say it was A-class, phenomenal, and I give it an A+. And it is something that I will look forward to in the future about learning about the progress that we made as a region in terms of looking at the drugs in the Caribbean.
The CICAD Executive Secretariat will support Barbados in holding the Demand Reduction Experts Group meeting next September, and that will include a visit to Barbados by our Assistant Executive Secretary and members of our Demand Reduction Unit early next year to start the preparations. And of course, we bring our wealth of expertise in demand reduction. There are many issues, and I know it will be a very fruitful meeting next September when Barbados chairs.